or the minutes?
No.
No, not on the minutes this time.
No.
Well, no, we're gonna.
No, don't vote.
Don't vote.
I'm not voting either.
Public Works.
Oh, you did? Oh, okay.
Well,
Yeah?
How we did it is.
I'll make a recommendation when we start.
And just accept it as.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a
That's what we
recommendation.
did.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and call the Monday, December 18th, 2017 finance meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Councilwoman Meany?
Here.
Councilman Palunas?
Here.
Councilman Zelwin?
Here.
Okay, we do need approval of the minutes. I believe Mr. Palunas has some, since obviously I'm the only one that.
Rather than both of us abstaining, we can accept the minutes as long as you are okay with it. We can accept it. So I'll move that we accept the minutes of October 16th, November 30th, November 13th, and November 20th in all one motion.
Correction, it would just be
These are
the
pending,
October
yeah.
16th and the November 15th. The other
Oh, you don't have those?
Those are pending.
pending.
Those are the budget hearings.
Okay.
And I talk
He
a
doesn't
lot
have
at those
those done
hearings,
yet.
so they're taking some additional time. So we'll have those for you in January.
Okay, so I'll move for the 16th and 20th then.
I second.
Roll call, please.
Councilwoman Meany?
Yes.
Councilman Palunas?
Yes.
Councilman Zelwin?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll start with item number 1, authorizing the city to participate in the State of Ohio Department of Administrative Services Cooperative Purchasing Program for fiscal year 2018. Matt?
This is the first of two related items on tonight's agenda. The first is approval to participate in the state of Ohio's cooperative purchasing program. The city does this every year. Our procurement policy and the state rules require an approval each year to participate in the state's cooperative program. It tends to be the most widely used across city departments. And as you know, with city procurement policy, if a department chooses to procure through the state of Ohio cooperative, they're in a sense waiving competitive bidding and tying into the state's competitive bidding process. So it's not that we are dispensing with bidding, we're using the state's ability to harness economies of scale and do the bidding or competitive solicitation for us. So again, this is an annual approval. We come to you each year for this approval, and this is for 2018 only.
Okay, well, I do know, being on finance for quite a while, that this is something that we do every year. Does anybody have any questions? Can I get a motion?
I'll move that we have legislation forward to the City Council adopting the ordinance for the participation in the State of Ohio Cooperative Purchasing Program for 2018 as an emergency measure to enable departments to be able to begin this purchasing in the first week of January of 2018.
Okay, can I get a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilwoman Meany?
Yes.
Councilman Palunas?
Yes.
Councilman Zelwin?
Yes.
Okay, item number 2, authorizing the city to participate in various governmental purchasing cooperative purchasing programs. Matt?
The second item, so we have the state authorization, which you just motioned to approve. Second item is to authorize the use of, I think we have 8 different governmental purchasing cooperatives. Some of these have currently been authorized by City Council. The idea here was to really reset the alternatives to the state cooperative, and so we have presented 8 different cooperatives that are widely used across government subdivisions in Exhibit A. For example, U.S. Communities has been authorized in the past by Council, as has NJPA and the NCPA. A lot of times what you'll see is a department that's using a different cooperative, they'll reference an ordinance number from the original authorization. That's one thing. So the idea is to reset the authorization on one piece of legislation. So going forward, departments have now 8 different cooperatives that are going to be authorized by Council. Gives them wider selection, better options, aside from the state and the 2 or 3 we were using. And then we're consolidating on one authorization. So just for administrative ease, providing them one authorization for these governmental cooperative consortiums was the idea. These are in a sense open-ended authorizations. The state we have to do every year. These we're saying, hey, Council, we would like to be able to use these 8 options on behalf of city departments. From time to time, maybe every 2 years, we may come back and refresh this list based on the cooperatives that we see departments were using, and there may be some others that present themselves as opportunities. So again, we're looking for authorization to utilize the cooperatives listed in Exhibit A. Same idea, we're latching on to their ability to do competitive solicitation or bidding on governmental organizations' behalf. And again, they have a larger audience. So I think this will help shift some of the, as you'll see in one of the pending items on the agenda, be able to shift some of the larger purchases, blanket purchases, into a cooperative. We still maintain the need to have a competitive selection of a product or service, and we're also saving time on the administrative side as well.
Right. And I did notice here, and there's no cost to the city for this.
No, those are free memberships for these organizations.
Great. Any questions?
Yeah, I got a quick question, Matt. So are there any overlaps between those 8, like items on the 8 lists and what's on the state?
Yes.
So it gives us the opportunity to compare which price is best between the state list and the others.
And a lot of times the pricing will be similar. You'll see a commonly used item will show up on a lot of these, and oftentimes they do have the same pricing. That's because some of them are looking at pricing from other state cooperatives as well. So they are intermingled, so to speak, when it comes to pricing, but it's one thing to be able to shop amongst these choices for better pricing, but also to expand the ability of things that we could procure. And that's the idea, is to continue expanding that list of items, especially on the materials, supplies, and goods that the city has to order.
I don't have any issue with the authorized governmental purchasing cooperative programs that we have here, but I just have an issue with, I want to make sure we don't rely on these, so we also look outside and get competitive bids for different products and different services, because a lot of times I found that you have the National Cooperative Purchasing Alliance, for instance, or the Joint Powers Alliance. A lot of times we've gotten better pricing by contacting vendors on certain things too, so I want to make sure that we do that also.
Yeah, and they can't, departments can rely on, if you're familiar with the purchasing agent ordinance, does specifically outline the process for using the state cooperative, and it says we need one additional bid or price. It's silent, though, on using the other cooperatives, so what we tend to do is encourage departments to follow suit with these other cooperatives, to follow the guidelines that are set forth in the city's ordinance, to, even though you may be going straight to one of these options, to also get one additional price. And it could be from another cooperative or outside of the cooperative as well.
I think we should look into, that's why I brought this up, I think we should look into amending that to require when we're using these, and we could probably do it in this ordinance too, that we ask for one additional quote or 2 additional quotes from an outside source.
I'd make one suggestion. Committee can decide what they feel is best. We're going to be coming to committee hopefully first quarter with some recommendations for updating the actual procurement ordinance of the city, and that's one area we can clarify, since we're going to be under the hood, so to speak, anyway, with the procurement ordinance, to maybe have more specifications. If you're using a cooperative, whether it's the state or any of the others authorized, that you have to have X number of additional pricing. But I'll leave that to the committee's discretion.
I'd be fine waiting on that. I'd be fine waiting on that as long as as long as we address that, you know, sometime.
That question's come up before, Councilman, too, is, well, it says if I use the state, I have to get one additional quote. I'm using GSA or something else. The ordinance itself doesn't speak to it. Now, we can infer, well, if the intent was to get one additional with the state, then that would apply to all these others. So I think it's an area we can clarify along with some of the other changes we're going to propose.
Okay. Any other questions? Can I get a motion?
A motion to move to legislation for authorizing the city to participate in various government purchasing cooperatives and various purchasing programs.
Do it under emergency.
And doing this under emergency.
Okay, can I get a second?
I will second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Councilwoman Meany?
Yes.
Councilman Palunas?
Yes.
Councilman Zella?
Yes.
Okay, item number 3, authorizing the Director of Finance to advertise for competitive bids for the approved 2018 infrastructure fund projects. Matt.
So this is an annual approval we seek from council, and the idea is to expedite the bidding process on the proposed and approved infrastructure fund projects. So these are projects that were presented in the proposed 2018 budget that council will be considering for adoption tonight. So the idea is if once the capital plan is approved, or capital budget is approved by council, this piece of legislation will enable the city engineer to begin the solicitation or advertisement solicitation of competitive bids. And we do them as a blanket authorization for all the projects at once. That way they don't have to come to council with individual authorizations to seek bids. So they still have to go through the bidding process, evaluation, and come to committee and council for the actual recommendation from the bids.
So this is basically just authorizing the advertisement?
Yes,
for it.
we started this type of
we did.
authorization, and we started for 17. We were a little late. I think we had approval in March for the 17 projects. The idea is to tee this up right before the beginning of the coming year. So now they have their authorization to begin advertising on these projects, and they can go forth and do that, and spend more time evaluating and bringing the recommendations to the committee and council.
I think my only comment on this, I think this is good. I think so often, and I think Bob would probably concur being on Public Works, we have obviously a lot of big projects here, and I think sometimes it seems like, they go into the fall before, and this is not blaming anybody, but, into the fall before, a project is bid, and we've been told, well, we didn't have time, and we understand that it's a process,
Yes.
putting things out to bid, so I think this is a great piece of legislation, and that's my comment. Any other questions?
I agree with Nancy on this, and the other thing that with these, when we do all the bidding and all the advertising at one time, it also eliminates the need for having special meetings and emergency meetings to approve, for instance, preserve subdivision, stormwater modifications, Phase 3. We would in the past have to have a special meeting if they wanted to get the project moving. Now we have blanket authorization that we know we're going to do the project. It's on one of the priority lists for Public Works, and they will be able to just go ahead and do that and come to the committee once it's not being approved, it's just getting the
Correct.
authorization, so
It's a
I'm fine
recognition
with
of,
that.
we do have a more stringent set of procurement guidelines compared to other jurisdictions. And that's not a bad thing. So this preserves that checkpoint. Council has to approve the authorization to even advertise for bids. So we're still doing that. But we're doing it in a more efficient way. You still have the ability to evaluate and approve each recommendation for all these projects.
Good. Any other questions? Can I get a motion, please?
I'll move that legislation be forwarded to council pursuant to Exhibit A upon approval of the 2018 capital appropriation measure under emergency, so that we can bid for the 2018 infrastructure fund project bids. And the emergency is to expedite the advertisement of the legal notices.
Okay, can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Councilwoman Meany?
Yes.
Councilman Palunas?
Yes.
Councilman Zellin?
Yes.
Okay, item number 4, authorizing the finance director to approve purchases for various vendors for the service department.
Now, this is another annual approval we have done in past years, and we're doing is seeking council approval for the vendors specified in Exhibit A. Those amounts exceed $25,000. We have been able to, because this is an item that's come before council at least the past 2 or 3 years. We've been able to shrink that list down. We're down to 5, and we're seeking council approval because it does exceed the threshold in the city procurement ordinance. The idea going forward is this hopefully should be the last time we have to come to council with this type of approval. We think this is an area where we can utilize, especially with this list of cooperatives we're going to be authorizing, to shift the needs, which you're seeing. It's mainly fleet maintenance stuff. So these are goods and services procured by the service department, but they're to the benefit of the entire city fleet. So they're spending money across the city fleet, and we have one cost center, and we're charging back the materials. The idea is to, number one, get council approval, so we're complying within our procurement guidelines. And then going forward is to utilize some of the options we have within our existing authority and expanded options with these cooperatives to shift some of these larger blanket purchases into those and remain compliant. And again, that's something we have slated for this coming year.
Okay. And I see Mr. Dursick is here. Bill, I just had a couple of questions for you. Just on a couple of these vendors, the Cerny Motor Sales, what would that be for?
Both Cerny and Rush are international dealers, and most of the larger part of our fleet, which is 2.5 tons and 5 tons and 10 tons, and the rubbish trucks, or the rear loader rubbish trucks, require parts from those vendors. And kind of like Matt said, we're working to get it on a procurement plan, but also it doesn't make sense to have to split it up among vendors and have to go all the way to Columbus for a part. Cerny is in Paynesville, and Rush is in on the west side, I believe, in Parma. So it doesn't. Those are the two closest vendors, and we use those to procure parts for those trucks.
Okay.
If I may, really, this links up with some of the previous comments we were discussing with item number 2. And we did, some of Bill's staff had called around to other cities, and they're dealing with the same type of challenge. These type of vendors, there are not many options, and especially if you're dealing with a certain type of truck chassis, you have to go to one of the 2 that are in the area. So this is another item that we can look at as far as proposals to amending the city's procurement ordinance to give us some additional flexibility, but preserve the necessity to find competitive pricing. So we're going to continue making some improvements there on that end.
Okay. And then Bell Equipment.
Bell Equipment is for the rubbish trucks. The old Bell would be the curb tenders, I believe. So that's the vendor who we purchased a truck from, and they're almost a sole source for parts for those packers.
Okay. Any other questions, Bob?
Bill, I understand those 3, but the 2 tire sales and tire service, there's obviously other tire companies around, so why do we have just these 2?
Those 2 have historically been the lowest price, especially since we have the new fleet manager came on. He introduced us to Economy Tire, and they've been far with the best prices, way better than Tread Rock. And even when we go on the Goodyear procurement, the prices are higher on that if you go off of the state bid, and Economy Tire is always lower. So that's why we've been using Economy a lot more than any of the other ones. And when we do check prices with other vendors, and they're always the lowest ones.
Would it be, I understand that, would it be better just to, rather than giving a blanket purchase order for them, just going and getting signatures each, if you're going to do something on an emergency basis, going to get signatures, or to do it this way and actually get 3 quotes?
I think it would be more efficient on our side just to be able to use those 2 vendors. I understand with regards to pricing, but we do check prices on a regular basis to make sure that those are the best prices for the city. And also with regards to Tread Rock, with fire and police vehicles, we do use brand name tires, and that's why we use Tread Rock more for that. But they are the best prices when we do shop around.
Okay, yeah, I understand it's efficient because you'd have the purchase order, the blanket purchase order with just the one company, but it might not be in the if we can find a better price. They might always be the lowest price, but if we can find a better price on something, we have a blanket purchase order. It encourages the city just to go and use that one vendor is what my...
Right, I agree with you, but we still do our due diligence to shop around, and if there is a better price, we do procure another PO for that particular vendor and that tire.
So you're still getting quotes for each tire?
Yes. Not every time. On a monthly basis, we check prices.
And I can attest to their due diligence. They are getting multiple quotes for individual procurements, especially with the fleet maintenance supplies and materials.
Yeah, I'm not going to hold it up, but I have an issue with the process on that.
I mean, I think I understand what you're saying, but I guess I have the utmost faith in our service department that they will be looking, and I think, as Matt said, when we start to maybe look into our procurement, how we're doing things, the first quarter of next year, that's something maybe we can discuss then of what's the best. I mean, I can see if you have somebody that isn't trustworthy, you could, open up a Pandora's box for them if they have a buddy who works for this place, and I understand what you're saying, Bob. I think that's your concern.
Well, my
correct?
concern is it's not really the best practice to do it this way, and I agree that Bill's very good, and I agree that Bill's staff is very good. However, if you're giving and Bill said it, if you're giving a blanket purchase order for $36,600, it's $36,600. You're giving a blanket purchase order. What's happening is Bill used the word efficient. It's very efficient because you have that purchase order. You just go ahead and buy it through that company. Right. But if we're not doing due diligence, he says he's doing it every month, which is good. But if we're not doing due diligence, we get audited or we have an issue. What you have is we could be paying 20% more on some items. Some items might be 10% less. We don't know that, and that's why recommending if we can address in the procurement policy.
Yeah, we're going to. Blanket purchases specifically for citywide materials and supplies. It needs to change, and this is an example why.
That's why I'm saying we need to get 2 or 3 quotes on certain
We
things.
found that some of the other cities we had spoken to were actually seeking waivers from their actual procurement policy. What we like to do is craft a solution to the existing policy and get that approved through council, so we don't have to seek a waiver to get what they need. Because I think we'll still find that with the tires in particular, they're most likely getting the best price. It's practical, not having to scour the.
Well, and I agree with you. I just want to make sure that we're doing this in the best possible way.
Understood.
So what we'll do is we can actually, when we do the procurement policy, we can actually apply it to this blanket purchase order, correct? When we redo it?
To this situation, not these specific purchase orders. These are for
The
this year.
situation,
Yes,
correct.
that's the idea.
I have one other question, because Bob brought up, I mean, in an audit, is this something that the auditors would look at and say, oh, you're not, you're giving them a blanket? Is this something
Now,
that?
they look more closely at the use of a blanket purchase order, and this is 100% compliant
Right.
with the state
Okay.
code for
Okay.
using of blankets or super. This is actually a super blanket.
Okay.
They do have more focus on looking at state code and then looking at how things are procured. So I don't have a concern as far as compliance with budgetary statute.
Okay.
But you understand the concern I have with when you just have it and then you say, well, we're going to audit it, we're going to look at it monthly for pricing, and I just have a concern that might not be getting the best possible price at all times when we do it this way.
Okay.
Any questions, Jeremy? Are you okay?
Bill, how much time do you think this saves on a given year or month, having the blanket versus going out every time you need tires?
It does save time, but, excuse me, but you also have to keep in mind that with regards to the larger tires, there are only a whole handful of dealers that deal with the larger tires, Economy, Tread Rock, and there's about 3 or 4 other ones that we check on prices. It's getting prices for car tires, police tires, that's fairly easy because pretty much most vendors have those. It's the larger truck tires that you have a harder time hunting down prices and you're limited with vendors.
I'm gonna support this because I do trust you, Bill, so I'm gonna support this, but I just want to make sure we address this in the procurement policy. With regard to time spent, it really doesn't in this type of situation. They could spend a lot of time on it. That's sometimes the problem with government. They can spend a lot of time on something, but it's just the best price is what the lowest and best bidder and lowest best price was the whole issue that I have with this. But I will support it, and you want to make a motion?
Yeah. I'll make a motion to forward legislation authorizing the finance director to approve purchases for various vendors for the service department.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Oh, under emergency, sorry.
Roll call, please.
Councilwoman Meany?
Yes.
Councilman Palunas?
Yes.
Councilman Zelli?
Yes.
Okay, item number 5, budget amendments to general fund and other fund budgets. I'll let you
Okay.
give the overview of.
Few year-end administrative items on the agenda for tonight. The first 2, I'm referring to Figure 1 in the memo. And then these changes are carried through into the budget ordinance that's included with the council agenda packet as well. So we're making one realignment between building and planning so we can post final payrolls for 2017, so it's budget neutral. Any changes we've seen over this year have been corrected in the 2018 budget that's proposed for adoption tonight between the planning and building departments. The next 2 items are not budget changes, they're corrections to the ordinance. We had not classified a few expenditure lines. They should have been classified as personal services and they were not. So that's just a change to the actual appropriation measure. No change to the budgets for those 2. I'm going to skip the general fund transfers out. I'll come back to that in 1 minute. The next item down, the State Highway Maintenance Fund 202, we're reducing appropriation. What we've seen over the past couple of years, the revenue that gets distributed by the state that comes into that fund, this is for the state highway maintenance, not the street maintenance,
Right.
Has been reduced. We're seeing about $85,000 per year. And we had, over the past few years, accumulated a balance in that fund, so we'd be able to appropriate the amount of the balance plus expected revenue. Now what we're seeing is we've utilized that balance, which is good, because it offsets general fund expense when we do that. And so what we're looking to do is, in order to be in compliance with state budget law, I'm going to reduce the appropriation in Fund 202 by $43,000, and that gets us down to the expected amount of revenue available in that fund for this year. And we've also made a similar change to the 2018 proposed budget for this fund and the other fund, so we can match appropriation with anticipated resources. And again, that's part of the rules we have to follow when it comes to state budgetary law. So that is getting us in compliance for year end. The other two changes, the last two changes, are changes in appropriation to two of our trust and agency funds, and those are just to post final expenditures for the year. The first is the sick and accumulated leave fund. It's to make sure we have enough appropriation for final separation payments when employees retire. And the last one is we transfer a portion of the income tax that's collected from the JED district, or the JED, and we had to make a slight correction. We actually had a decent year in the JED, so we're increasing appropriation to cover the transfer out to Bainbridge Township. And those are the changes there. The other item, the general fund transfers out, we're seeking, and I talked about this a little bit at the budget hearing back in November. We're going to be ending the year with the projected operating surplus in the general fund. So we're proposing to allocate general fund resources to 4 different funds: the budget stabilization fund, the general capital fund for equipment, the accumulated sick and leave fund for the 27th payroll, and there's one other, the budget stabilization fund. Am I skipping one? Which one? Oh, I know. The new medical self-insurance fund. We'll start that reserve up. Those are the 4. So we're looking to increase appropriation by that $2.2 million number, so then we can then seek approval for the transfers, which is the next item. So that's the first step. First step is to increase appropriation, and the next item we'll be talking about the actual transfer authorization itself. So those are the recommended amendments to the budget. Again, they're to really finish off the year, be in compliance with state code, and make sure we have appropriation in the correct place to post final expenditures for the year. And as always, we're seeking emergency approval for these because they are budget related.
Any questions?
Just one question has, actually 2 questions. One, you want it on first reading and as an emergency?
Yes.
So do you want council to leave it on first reading tonight, or do you want it
No,
approved?
adopted on first reading. Does it say on first reading? It should say
Well, it
adopted
says
on first
on
reading.
first reading and as an emergency, so it really
Yeah,
doesn't.
to approve on first reading and as an
On first,
emergency.
okay.
Okay. And the other question is, on the clerk's office and mayor's office, there's no number. Is there a change?
There's no change to the budget. We had, on the original appropriation measure, we had some of the expense lines should have been categorized as personal services, not others. So we're just shifting those over. And
So the clerk's budget will stay the same?
yes, yeah, the total budget isn't changing. We're not moving appropriation from any lines either. Just the way the measure captured or categorized those lines was in the wrong place. There's no change to the actual budget at all.
Yeah, sure. Anyone else?
No.
All right, I'll make a motion to have the legislation forwarded to council for the budget amendments to the general fund and other fund budgets, as described by Matt under emergency.
I will second.
Roll call, please.
Councilwoman Meany?
Yes.
Councilman Palunas?
Yes.
Councilman Zelen?
Yes.
Okay, item number 6, approving cash transfers from the general fund, Fund 100, to various operating and capital funds. Matt.
Previous item, we requested to increase appropriation by $2,217,700, and that's to fund the 4 transfers out of the general fund that you see in Exhibit A. And I'll run through them briefly. We're looking to increase the balance in the budget stabilization fund, and that should be 101 in the exhibit, not 100, by $300,000. That'll get us to an even $700,000, or I'm sorry, $7 million by the end of 2017. And the second one is to the, oh, it does say 101, I'm sorry. Capital Fund Equipment 491, we're going to pre-fund a portion of the 2018 capital plan for the equipment. So we're looking at a budget of about 1.2 million. We're looking to use some of the 17 carryover surplus in the general fund to fund a portion of that, and this was outlined in the budget hearings. The third transfer is to set up the reserve or start the reserve in the new employee medical self-insurance fund. So this first transfer of $1,067,000 will get us started. Throughout the year, remember we talked about how the funding mechanism works for that new self-insurance fund. We'll be moving revenue over as part of the payroll process each pay period to continue to build the revenue to cover the costs that are coming out of that fund. So this is the starting step for that new fund, number 605. And we did send a request to create that fund to the state auditor's office a few weeks ago, so we should be ready to go in 2018. The final transfer is $250,000 to our accumulated sick and leave fund. Remember, because we have a biweekly payroll process, we have a quirk of the calendar every 11 years. We have a 27th pay on a cash basis. So we're looking to continue to build the reserve in this fund. We're looking at, it'll be just over $1.1 million in 2020. So this is taking some of the surplus we're going to realize in 17 and setting it aside in that reserve to cover our 27th pay in 2020. And again, so we're appropriating and asking for separate authorization to actually do the transfers. It's a technicality, but we have to have 2 authorizations to do these.
Any questions? Can I get a motion?
I'll move that legislation be forwarded to the City Council to approve the proposed fund transfers as an emergency basis, and the stated reason for the emergency is to transfer funding to various budgetary funds effective December 18th, 2017.
Can I get a second?
I second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Councilwoman Meany?
Yes.
Councilman Flores?
Yes.
Councilman Zellin?
Yes.
Okay, item number 7, authorizing the payments of amounts due for which the finance director has issued then and now certificates. Matt?
Yeah, this is our routine approval every month. Anytime we have a invoice was paid with an invoice date that predates the purchase order, we need a legislative approval if it's $3,000 or more. We had 2 occurrences in November. Again, all of these were paid from a purchase order. They're all part of the approved budget, but we do have this requirement in state code to adhere to, and that's why we bring these to the committee and council every month if we have them.
I guess my only question, Matt, on this one, for the Cintas, the invoice date was August 1st,
Yes.
and purchase order date was November 9th? I mean, is that normal that it just,
I think what happens with Cintas, we have invoices because everyone is using
Everybody,
Cintas
right.
and invoices are floating around. Now,
Okay.
our procurement
Surface.
Analyst is working on a better process to get
Okay.
those consolidated on time, and I think
Okay.
we'll have this addressed next year.
any other questions? Can I get a motion, please?
I'll motion to move to legislation authorizing the payments of amounts due for which finance director has issued then and now certificates.
Can I get a second? Under emergency.
Oh, under emergency.
Yes, thank you. I will second.
Roll call, please.
Councilwoman Meany?
Yes.
Councilman Flores?
Yes.
Councilman Zellin?
Yes.
Okay, now we have correspondence to committee. We have a notification of natural gas supply contract with IGS Energy. Matt?
And this is a required notification. Council has authorized the mayor and finance director to negotiate and enter into contracts for both electricity and natural gas supply. The ordinance that's referenced in my memo to committee addresses the natural gas supply. Our fixed rate contract was coming due this month, and so I worked with a couple of brokers to get quotes on natural gas supply. We were looking at fixed because the expectation over the next 2 to 3 years is natural gas prices will continue to increase. If economic activity continues to remain healthy, all the futures markets are pointing towards some slight increases over the next few years. So it first made sense to go with a fixed rate contract. When we're looking at the terms 1, 2, or 3, and 4 in some cases that were offered, it made sense to go with the 2-year fixed rate contract. We had, I think, a total of 5 or 6 different supply quotes. IGS Energy, who is the current supplier for the city, had the lowest quoted fixed price at $3.24 per MCF of gas, based on a city of our size, our type of use, for a 2-year term. I think the closest supply quote was about 10 or 15 cents higher per MCF than IGS Energy, but we had 5 or 6 in total. So we did ended up entering into a contract a few weeks ago with IGS Energy for 2 years, which is good because then the weather got cold.
Right.
And these pricings are based on the NYMEX price. So that price did shoot up by 10 or 20 cents for a 2-year term as soon as the weather got cold. So we were able to get in and had good timing. Previous rate was $2.99. The new rate is higher, but that's because the market is higher. So we did lock into a decent rate. The previous contract term, this is also a very good rate. We're still We're not at historic lows, but we're still at historic average prices for gas. So this is, I think, was a good move to lock in for 2 years at this price for natural gas.
And when we did this previously, it was for 2 years?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Any other questions? Can I get a motion? Oh, no, we don't need a motion.
No, this is just the correspondence.
Never mind. Okay, then we have the 2018 operating and capital budget updates.
Yeah, just a formal notification to the committee. We have our third reading and adoption on both the 2018 operating and capital budgets for 2018. We did make a slight change to the 2018 operating budget. I did reduce appropriation in those street maintenance funds that I mentioned earlier, so you'll see that in the version of the 2018 operating measure that's in the council agenda packet. And other than that, I appreciate the committee and council's participation in the budget hearing process, and look forward to the vote tonight. And we should be ready to go for 2018 on January 1.
Great. And now we have reports to the committee, the monthly financial report from November 2017.
The final monthly report you'll be getting, I'll do a December report for January, but I'm going to spend more time focusing on the year results for 2017. I will provide the committee, I think the plan is for February meeting, a cash basis results for the general fund and other funds of the city. By then, we'll know exactly what our operating result was for the general fund, where we're sitting as far as reserve balances, and how departments perform within the existing budget plan. As far as the November results, you had a little bit of exposure when we did budget hearing presentations as far as where we were going. I'm just now getting some final numbers in some of the major revenue sources. Income tax, for example, did finish fairly close to what we were estimating for 17 back in November. So we're about 3.5% growth over last year for income tax, as an example. And as far as departmental budgets are concerned, aside from some of the course corrections to the actual budget themselves, departments look to be on target to largely underspend their operating budgets and finish the year with probably around 2% under budget as a general statement for general fund operating budgets for the city. So what you see here is really one of the final indications of where we're at. There's nothing too markedly different from the October report.
I think my only comment, I mean, just looking at some of these, I mean, I think all these numbers really look really pretty good in the revenue.
Yes.
You know, one of them, like the community center miscellaneous receipts, you estimated that at 24,000. They got 119,000.
And some of that's probably classification. We're
okay.
making some improvements. The 18
such a-
revenue estimates will have some more accurate reflection
Okay.
of where the revenue should be. I think they were probably hitting some of these revenue
Okay,
counts rather
kinda-
than using the specific ones.
Okay, yeah, so I
I
was
think
going, whoa.
that's a good question, because one of the changes we made in 17 was to, I think, increase some of the accuracy and expectation of what the community life, the
Right.
community center, senior, and Center for the Arts revenues would be.
Well, yeah, that's why I was curious what
Yeah.
these miscellaneous receipts were when you
Correct.
are thinking that number and you go, obviously, way over that.
Yeah, but
which
as a
is good
whole,
thing, but-
as a whole, I think will be around 1% of the anticipated budget for program revenue.
And then I think the one thing I love, because I'm pretty anal when it comes to this, was the Cleveland Water, the reimbursement from them. We expected 15,000 and we got 39,280.
There were more water breaks.
Well, you always worry about whether they actually pay us, so, and
You
I
do,
know
yeah.
sometimes, you know, it's not all then. And then, Matt, I just have one other, with the revenue that you were expecting from, and this is the local government state
Yes,
fund, you expected 110, and we've gotten 31, so what?
yes, that's something known as HB 40.
Is that for, okay,
State
I was going to
budget.
say,
So
that's the, okay.
They've made 2 successive reductions in one component local government fund. The smaller piece is what's known as the direct municipal distribution. And historically, cities in Ohio that have a local income tax, which is most of them, were receiving a separate allocation of local government funds. The previous biennial budget had reduced that by about 2/3. This biennial budget that was approved effective July 1 eliminated that distribution, so it's now gone. We're not happy about it, but we can certainly absorb that reduction. It's not material, but it is, I think it's the principle of it that the state, it's another example of the state has backed away from the decades-long commitment of allocating resources to localities where the money's actually collected and where, so I've always said, that's where things get done. It's at the local level. So it's not that we're not earning this money. Each subdivision is responsible for a lot of what the state is collecting.
And then my last comment is Grantwood, which I know I've always kind of kept an eye on, and I have to say these numbers really look pretty good. I'm happy to see the power cart rentals, because I know we've replaced some of those.
Yes.
We've spent some money on that, and that's looking like it came close to what the estimate was, and the 18-hole looks like it was more than what we had estimated,
I think
so.
part of it is having an assist from the weather being
Right,
so
we
nice
certainly
later in
did
the
have a
year, so
nicer
it certainly
summer,
helps.
so.
We'll take it.
Okay. All right, anybody else have any questions on these? Okay. And anything else, Matt, in these reports that you want to?
Nothing in the reports that I would point to. I think they're fairly what I expected to see in November based on what we've seen the past few months.
Well, again, thank you for these reports. I don't know, I mean, for Jeremy and Bob, I've found, and I've worked for 3 finance directors, I think Matt's reports are really in-depth, and they really kind of have everything laid out very nicely. So, like I say, I appreciate them, and I think I would assume you guys, when you read them, it pretty much tells you what's going on. Okay, and then we have a discussion. I know Matt and I have already talked about this. This is in regards to the proposed dates for the 2018 Finance Committee meetings. Matt and I had talked, and, you know, we always try to do Public Works the first Wednesday, Safety the second, the third is Finance. And the way the calendar works, the majority of those dates are going to be after the second council meeting. Therefore, there's certain legislation that sometimes to wait a couple of weeks, sometimes even 3 weeks before the next council meeting. Matt and I had discussed possibly, because I know this past year, the majority of our finance meetings were the Monday at 6 before the second council meeting. And I guess I just want to throw out, I think for me, it makes sense to do it, just let's permanently change it, than to keep always, you know, monthly. I think there might be 2 months this year that it would work, that we would be able to have the meeting on that Wednesday, and then the following Monday's the council meeting. But I'll defer certainly to you gentlemen and see what your feelings are about this.
Yeah, no, that works for me. I prefer that too.
Okay, are you okay, Bob?
I'm fine with that. The only thing is, is it makes sense to have it always at 6, or do we want to have it at 5:30 in case there's more discussion?
I'm open to suggestions. I'm here, so whatever works for you.
Well,
I just don't know how long some
No,
of the
I
meetings are going to
understand.
go,
Oh,
because
for
if
sure.
we're going to make this permanent, I'd be fine doing it.
Right.
Rather
No,
than
that's a
on
good point.
Wednesday. But
Right.
the problem is if we had it on the Wednesday, then you bring it back, you'd have to have special meetings in order to approve certain items. You'd have to have
Before
special
that.
meetings before the council meeting, which could be done. But the issue is that if we're doing it at 6, we're pretty time constricted. We didn't have much of an agenda tonight.
Right.
We only have 15 minutes left. If we have a lot of questions or a lot of explanation, what happens then?
I mean, 6 has been working for us, you know, throughout this last year,
Generally
but,
it has, yeah.
I mean, if and I understand what you're saying, Bob, I mean, we can, I suppose, do 5:30 or 5:45, or to
Or-
give us, you know.
Or you could look at the agenda. Well, the other thought is you
Well,
could look
yeah,
at
then we can just-
you could look at the agenda
Right.
a week or two before and send an email to everyone and say,
Right, and have Carol,
we have a lot of
Send out.
business coming up. Can we do it at
We'll do it
5?
at 5.
Is
Okay.
everyone okay with 5:15 or 5:30?
okay.
And then that way we don't
yeah.
have an issue. But I just
Sure.
don't want to have
no, no,
I just don't
I
want to
see
have
what
a
you're
rush,
saying. Okay.
because then we have the council meeting
Gotcha.
right at 7,
Gotcha.
and we can't get everything discussed fully. So
Oh, no.
maybe we could just evaluate that monthly.
Okay, so if that's okay, Jeremy, with you, so, you know, we'll just
absolutely.
kind of, Matt and I will talk, and if we see that it's gonna be a bigger agenda, then we'll, like I say, we'll shoot out an email to everybody, let Carol have enough time to notify that the meeting will be changed. But, I mean, at this point, we'll say 6, and then if we need to change it, and if, you know, the agenda is gonna warrant that we'll need more time, then we'll contact everybody. All right. Okay, anything else, Matt?
All I have.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second?
Okay, roll call, please.
Councilwoman Meany?
Yes.
Councilman Palunas?
Yes.
Councilman Zellin?
Yes.